Welcome, everybody, to the Legends of Hoosier Hysteria on the Gruely True Sports Network. I'm your host for the Legends of Hoosier Hysteria, Mike Goodpaster. And today we are going to have as our guest the legend from Newcastle, Indiana, Steve Alford, who won a 1987 national championship with the Indiana Hoosiers, which we'll speak about today. Also a 1984 Olympic gold medalist. And of course, we'll talk about his time at Newcastle High School playing for his dad, Sam, where they did make it to the semi-state finals in 1983, coming up short there. So this interview today was recorded at a previous date, and the interview I was joined by Lawrence Central, 1977, Steve Risley, who also won a national championship in 1981 with the Indiana Hoosiers and Big Ten championships in 1980 and 81. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk to Steve Alford. 1984 Olympic gold medalist, Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame member, and the best Steve to ever play at Indiana. Help me welcome to the show, Steve Alford. How you doing, Steve?
I'm very good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, Risley, did you want to start this off with some inane question?
No. Okay, no, go ahead.
All right. The thing that always...
I'm enamored.
Yes, I grew up, I graduated from high school in 1987, and the first time I remember seeing you, Steve, would have been I think it was the Indianapolis semi-state against Broad Ripple in the Sweet 16. You played for your father, Sam, who's one of the great coaches in Indiana high school basketball history. You want to talk to us a little bit about playing for your father and just growing up in Indiana?
Yeah, that was very special times, and, Steve can relate to what I'm talking about, too. I grew up playing in one class, so it's very much like the NCAA tournament at the collegiate level, is that whoever makes the tournament, you have a chance to win it, and there was only one state championship, and what was cool about Indiana, you had over 300 high schools, and all of those high schools were vying for one state championship, and so I'm very, very fortunate, very blessed that I grew up in an era and a time where, winning a state championship meant, you were literally the best in the state, and trying to compete for that, only getting to the Elite Eight, not being able to win one was one of my bigger disappointments, but just growing up in that state at that time, I can remember my goal was never to be an Olympian. I never thought about that. I never even really thought about the NBA. Obviously, Coach Knight, Indiana were extremely hot, and I can remember whether it was watching the 76 team or the 81 team and teams in between. It was really about, could I get good enough to have a chance to play at Indiana one day. And so being able to play for my father was just very special. And he coached 4 years at Martinsville, and then when we went to Newcastle, the first place he took me was the field house, which is the largest high school field house in the world. And when I saw that, I knew that I not only wanted to play there, but I wanted to try to fill that one day. And so I can always go back and think about all the individual workouts that I did in that gym, sometimes at 6 in the morning, sometimes at midnight or later. That was my house for so long and had so much to do with my development. And my dad was a huge, huge part of that. He's, to this day, a mentor and somebody that's meant a great deal to my success, and a great deal of just teaching me the fundamentals of the game and how to play the game, because I think he knew I wasn't going to be the strongest, quickest, fastest, jump the highest, but if I fundamentally could be awfully good and how to play the game and think the game, if I was at an elite level, then I would have a chance. And he taught me all those things at a very early age.
All right, so when was the first time that Coach Knight contacted you about possibly being an Indiana Hoosier? Because I grew up in Indiana at the same time. He got pretty much who he called at that point, but when did you first have contact with Coach Knight?
Well, I wasn't so much contact of him wanting me at that time, but I started going to his camp in third grade. My dad was, as I mentioned, a high school coach, so we actually cheated a little bit. You were only supposed to go into the fourth grade, but Chad Tucker and myself were coach's kids, and Coach Tucker and my dad worked the camp, so he allowed our sons to come. And I can remember Chad and I being third graders, and we had our own dorm room, and I don't think either one of us spoke to each other or said a word in the entire week of camp. We were so young, but I went to his camp from third grade all the way through 12th grade. But it was probably I think when the interest started, probably late in my 10th grade year, and then an offer came in my 11th when I was a junior.
And here's the deal, Steve. I applied to go to Coach Knight's camp 3 years in a row and got my check sent back to me all 3 years, telling me that they were full and they had no room for me. I tried to get into Coach Knight's camp down in Bloomington, and I never went to Coach Knight's camp.
That probably would have happened. That probably would have happened to me too. I got in because of that.
But it was funny. There was no favoritism. It was like I just got rejected, and I was a fairly well-known player at that point in time in high school. And I got rejected every year. And then he calls me one day and he recruits me and says, Risley, you want to come play at IU? I'm like, I already committed to Notre Dame, Coach. He goes, well, you want to play at IU? He goes, yeah. And there you go. And so I said, well, you got to call Digger Phelps and tell him that I'm going to decommit to come to. He said, I'll handle Digger. Don't worry about that. High school basketball. Did they make a mistake by going to multiple classes? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but should they have stayed one class basketball? Should it have stayed one class?
I'm probably not the right one to ask, Steve.
There you go.
I had so much fun. I had so much fun growing up, knowing that it wasn't about. I grew up in an era that it wasn't about everybody getting a blue ribbon or everybody, everybody that runs on the track, and you got 8 lanes, and one guy crosses the finish line, but the other 7 are getting the same ribbon. I just didn't grow up in that era. And if I finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, it was, hey, thanks for running, but if you want to get blue, you got to work harder. And that's just the era that I grew up in, and I'm so fortunate to do that. I'm not saying that I'm totally against class. It's just I'm glad that I grew up to where, even though I didn't win it and Connersville won it my senior year, I know we played the best. I know we got bracketed, and it was fun watching the brackets, and it was, that back then it was a matter of whether you played the first game in the Semi-State or the second game because you're going to get less rest, and it was part of the draw. But I do know that attendances were, in my opinion, the attendance and the recognition of Indiana basketball was much greater then because you only played on Friday and Saturdays. So it was like football. Business people had all week to prep for these big games. And my senior year, we played Marion on a Friday night. James Blackman, who was an Indiana All-Star and went to Kentucky and had a great career. We had 10,000 in the Fieldhouse for that on Friday night. And Saturday night, Scotty Hicks, who went to Cathedral and then had a great career at Notre Dame, came in on Saturday, another 10,000. And you don't have that today. You've got incredible gyms that have been knocked down and condemned in the state of Indiana now. And a lot of that, in my opinion, ended up being driven a little bit with the economy years ago, but a lot of it had to do when class basketball came in and conferences changed and sectional sites changed and regional sites changed. I mean, there's been years where the Newcastle Fieldhouse hadn't had a tournament in it, and you got the largest gym in the state. So I think it affected kind of just the aura and the excitement, enthusiasm. Not that there's not, but I just don't think it's like it was when it was just one class.
No, and I have a friend that in 1992 played for Jacksonville, which is a small high school down here in southeastern Indiana, and they won the sectional.
Yep.
Now, fast forward that like 20, 25 years later, he was an assistant coach on a team that won the state championship. And I was talking to him after that, and he was like, everybody here was more excited when we won that sectional.
Right. Absolutely. I just think, now you play different days of the week. You'll play on, you'll play on Tuesdays, and I just think that Friday, Saturday of having all week, the enthusiasm of the tournament, I think it's affected the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star Series. I think there's a lot of things it's affected. In my opinion, that's just me. I'm obviously a Hoosier, and I still love high school basketball and all that. I'm just saying I'm fortunate and blessed. I'm glad I played when I played.
Did you ever get to play in Hinkle?
Yes, that's where we beat We beat Broad Ripple in the semi-state in the morning and lost to Connorsville in the evening.
Yeah. See, all of our sectional was Hinkle sectional, our regional was Hinkle, our semi-state was Hinkle. So all of my high school was all, and you talk about what a treasure that is to get to play in Hinkle. I mean, and we put 17,000 people, in the stands for the sectionals, and it was truly a treasure. Because I played against Woody, I played against Landon, Antonio Martin. I mean, some great players were
Tim
all
Johnson.
in that sectional. Tim Johnson, who ended up beating us from Aurora.
Then the state tournament was Market Square Arena, and if you didn't make it, the teams that didn't make it to the state, all those teams still went, and so you had 4 high school teams. You had 4 high school teams competing that day, and you had 300 other high schools that had their teams there watching and hanging out in Indy. And just the aura of that one state championship, it was on TV. It was just it was a happening. And I think it was Indiana high school basketball had their own March Madness that was at a very high level.
Yeah, no doubt. Move on into your championship year, because it's kind of a prelude to the Final Four going in here. And take us through. You guys, I'm looking at your record now. You guys didn't have the crap we had in 81. You guys were pretty good all year long. I mean, you're down here winning a lot of games, and we're losing a lot of games. We're 7-5 at one point. Coach Knight, as you know, Coach, he's going ballistic on us every day. Isaiah and him are fighting tooth and nail. How was your relationship with Coach? Because you were the leader of that basketball team, bar none. How was your leadership and responsibilities with Coach for that whole year? Did he rely on you, or did you have to fight him? Because I know Isaiah and him fought infinitely.
Yeah, I was a coach's kid, so I didn't fight Coach. I kind of understood it. Doesn't mean I liked it at times. Just like when my dad would get on me, or my dad would discipline me or kick me out of practice. But I had a respect for it, and even if I didn't understand why, I just accepted it because the coach was coach and I was a player, and so I always respected that. So it wasn't really about going head to head with either he or Coach Knight. It was my senior year. It was for sure Coach and I think I had an understanding that if he wanted to get on Daryl, I wanted him to get on me, because I thought I could handle that maybe better than what Daryl, and I knew the importance that Daryl had for our team inside, especially now that we'd added Dean Garrett, who we desperately needed a big, and that freed up Daryl to be more of a power forward, which is where he needed to be. So it was things like that I think there was an understanding. Our losses were just the 4 road losses. We had lost at Vanderbilt in the non-conference, and then we lost at Purdue, at Illinois, and at Iowa. So we were pretty consistent that year. We didn't have I think the Vanderbilt game was, I think that flight back might have been the worst experience of the senior year. But other than that, it was a pretty consistent season to where I thought we were getting better every year. Joe's class, that whole class of Hillman and Sloan and Cree Smith, and that whole class got redshirted prior to that. So they were like old juniors, and I think that really helped our team as well.
Yeah, and you talk about that team going into the NCAA tournament in 1987. You get to play the first 2 rounds at the Hoosier Dome. That had to be a great experience for you.
Well, and it came down to the last home game. We had to beat Ohio State at home, and Purdue had to lose at Michigan. And because that happened, Purdue and Indiana both tied for the conference championship, and because it was a co-championship and we were ranked higher and those type of things, currently at that point of the year, we were able to get the number 1 seed, and the number 1 seed kept us in Indianapolis, Cincinnati. So our route was Indianapolis and Cincinnati, which was obviously a great route to have when it came to our fans being able to come to the games.
Yeah, it played at the Hoosier Dome in front of that big of a crowd. Did that put more pressure on the team? Because I remember the Auburn game. I think you guys were down by double digits early in that game.
We were. We beat Fairfield pretty easily in the first round. And domes are different. That was really the beginning, I think, of the domes. Now they use them all the time. But a lot of just like rules, I think players adjust, coaches adjust. But playing in domes were kind of relatively new. And so I think just the vastness of it, and we had such a huge crowd. It wasn't so much the pressure of the crowd. It was just trying to handle that kind of crowd and that kind of building. And Fairfield went really well, and then Auburn kind of punched us in the face to start the game. And one of Coach Knight's, famous timeouts, he has a way of getting you to snap your shorts and start playing at a different level. And I can remember coming out of that timeout. I have no idea if it was the second media timeout or what it was, but really from that point on, it might have been a 25 to 30 point turnaround from that point on.
Yeah, because if I remember, was it Dean Carrott that got in a confrontation with one of the Auburn players, and that seemed like it kind of changed the momentum of the game also.
Right, but I think Dean probably got a little fired up because of a certain timeout that we had. Everybody got on a little bit of edge after that timeout.
Oh, all right. So what was it like playing Duke? Because I'm not 100% sure, but I think that was the first time Coach Knight had coached against Coach Krzyzewski.
Yeah, you might be right. And I was at the beginning of the Duke of when Coach Krzyzewski was going to start his run that has, continued for all these years. And I had a chance after being let go at UCLA. I had a chance this winter to go spend a couple days with Coach Krzyzewski, and wow, what an incredible culture, and what he has going on at Duke is very, very impressive. And I was at the beginning of that. I was with Amaker and Snyder and those guys, King, very, very good basketball team. I think we won 88-82 in what was a really, really good basketball game and a tough game. And then we have to beat LSU at the buzzer. Daryl has a 12-footer from straight on and just misses it wide right. And Ricky Callaway grabs and lays in, and Ricky ends up being from Cincinnati. And, so it was just, you got to be lucky at times. I always told Daryl, I said, if you miss that short or long, we probably don't win. It was a good thing you threw that thing right all the way to the right side.
Was Dale Brown still coaching LSU in '87? I can't remember. Yeah. Knight had no affinity for Dale Brown whatsoever. that was from '81. I mean, I remember there were only a few coaches that the coach didn't really like, and Dale Brown was probably at the top of that list of all people. He just didn't have an affinity for in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, so there you go. So then you go on, you play UNLV, and they're like the best team in the country right now, are they not?
Well, they had a tough. We thought we could have been Iowa, we had split with them during the year, and Iowa was very, very good. Could really score the basketball, and Iowa had them down big, and UNLV came back and beat them in the second half. And so UNLV was a 1 seed. We were a 1 seed. And they, I think, might have been number 1 in the country at that time. And very, very fast. Played the game at a high tempo. And Coach did this several times throughout my career, but 2 in particular. I remember against Carolina my freshman year when we upset Carolina in the tournament. He talked about, hey, we're not slowing it up, because at that time I went through different eras. We had no shot clock, and we had a long shot clock. We had no three-point line until my senior year. So there was a lot of rule changes in my 4 years, and a lot of people thought we would have held the ball against Carolina, and Coach is like, no, they're going to run, they're going to trap, and we're going to throw over the trap, and we're going to get every shot we want. And he was right, and we did those things. And then I can remember going to the Final Four. He said, people are going to think we're crazy, but we're going to run with the run on reps. We're going to play in an up-tempo game and get after it. And we did that, and we were able to beat them. The game was in the 90s, and we were able to get a really good win of a game playing really at the tempo that the Rebels wanted to play.
Yeah, and that was a game that I remember Mark Wade, the UNLV guard, who was 1 for 6 in the game, didn't even look like Knight even wanted to guard him unless he was within 10 feet of the basket.
Well, we didn't want to guard him. That's why he had me guarding. So the plan was don't guard him, and the best player to say don't guard somebody was probably me. So that was but now Mark still had about 16, 17 assists in that game. But we knew that Freddie Banks, who was a great scorer, I mean, they had some really good players, Patio. They had a lot of really
Armin Gilliam
players, and Armin Gilliam. So we just wanted to try to help off of Wade as much as we could. But we didn't win that game because we locked down defensively. I don't think we were – I always told Coach this when we talked. I'm like, I don't feel like of all your championship teams, we weren't one of your better defensive teams. And he looks at me and goes, you think? How long did that take you to figure that out? And so we weren't known to be that defensive team, but I do think we were one of his resilient teams that if you look at our run, it was a team that just found a way to win that last 4-minute game. When you came out of that last media timeout, we were really good winning that last 4-minute game. And we had to do that against Duke. We had to do that against LSU. We had to do that against UNLV, and we had to do it again against Syracuse.
All right, so going into the national championship game, what was the Sunday? I mean, preparation the same as it normally was for the team?
Oh, yeah, and Steve would tell you that it never changed with Coach. It doesn't matter if you're playing for a championship game or you're playing in the Hoosier Classic or you're playing opening night or everything's the same. Coach is a military guy. That's his love, and so it's all about discipline. It's all about a routine. And so, we were one of I think the last team to even come to New Orleans, or a lot of teams, you're reading about teams now. The games aren't till Saturday, but teams showed up on Wednesday of this week that got there yesterday. We didn't do that. We did it just like we did a normal road trip. And so the Sunday preparation was the same.
Yeah, I'll attest to that. In 81, of course, that's the day that Reagan got shot. And I'll never forget, and we've talked about this before, Knight immediately gathered us all up and took us out of the hotel and took us away from televisions and got us over to a high school gym and just got us away from the media. So we were just focused on basketball. I mean, we were going through our normal routine. It's like he didn't want us laying in our hotel rooms. He didn't want us doing anything to where we could sit and concern about, as far as he was concerned, we were playing the game that night. And they canceled the Oscars the night in 81 when Reagan got shot. And we went right out and stayed so focused. And I think that's the reason we beat North Carolina, because they had Worthy, they had Perkins, they had Al Wood, they had Matt Doherty, they had Dean Smith. They had a great team, but we were so focused, and it was Coach that just kept us so focused on what we were doing, and he immediately eliminated all the distractions. And we got on a bus, and we went to a high school. He put cots up. We all laid around on cots, practiced, ate some pizzas, got pregame meal and everything like that. But he was so regimented and disciplined in that and keeping you on track of what you needed to do. That was great. Steve, is Knight probably – I think he is. And you're a coach, and you obviously coached against many great people. Is he probably the greatest bench coach you've ever seen in terms of just being able to coach a game during a timeout?
Yeah, I think he just keeps it simple. He doesn't get rattled.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I've always tried to learn from him. And I've always, when he was coaching at Texas Tech and I was in New Mexico, I would go see him a couple times a year and just sit with him. And I always wanted to watch him work in a film room because I thought nobody in the game could watch film the way he does and then prep his team. Every coach watches film, but he just does it differently. He sees things that the normal person watching the clip doesn't see, and the way he just sets his teams up. And I think that's the thing. I think you learn as you're there, Steve, and you probably the same way.
Right.
Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. At the time you're senior, it just becomes part of the DNA. But I can remember my freshman year, we played Illinois State. I think it might have been one of my first games at Indiana, and I can remember calling my dad or talking to him afterwards, and I'm like, the game was over. It was my first game, so I'm like, Dad, we knew their stuff better than they knew it. I mean, we're out there defending their stuff better than they're running their stuff, and I just think that was what really made Coach, was that he stayed in the moment. He was a great defensive preparation guy. but I can remember having big nights. I can remember he did similar things that my dad did to me in high school. I'd come off a really good game, and Coach would blister me the next day in practice because he's like, I don't care what you did yesterday. Now we got to focus on what we're doing 2 days from now. And he just had a really good sense as a coach to keep you in the moment and focused on getting better that day. And sometimes you don't appreciate that as much when you're playing as you do years down the road. And I know the thing that I appreciate probably most is that he made me better every day, even if there was a day I didn't want to get better.
Right. Did you guys keep the notebooks? Did he have you guys keep notebooks?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had the notebooks.
Yeah.
I'm practicing. You took them out on the court with you. You're right. So you know the legend of that.
Right.
You had a notebook, and you wrote everything down, and he had class. It was class.
Yeah.
And akin to what you're talking about, I remember when I speak to people about IU basketball, I say, your freshman year, you're in awe of everything. You're playing in front of 18,000 people. You're playing in Assembly Hall. You're playing on television. Your sophomore year, you've gotten yelled at. You're scared to death. It's like, oh, my God, I'm going to get yelled at. I don't know why I'm going to get yelled at, but I'm going to get yelled at. Your junior year, you're kind of like scratching your head going, I've kind of seen this somewhere before, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. Then it's like your senior year, it's like, you're laughing at the freshmen, sophomore, and juniors because they haven't figured it out yet, is how the motivation goes and how Coach Knight worked. And that's the whole systematic system of how he operated. But there was a total method to his madness of everything that he did.
Right.
He never flew off the handle. I mean, there was methodology in everything that he did. I mean, I think when he threw the chair, he may have gotten whacked out for a minute and threw the chair. That's about the only time that I think I can ever say where I thought he really just kind of went wacky there for a second. But there's a tremendous methodology to what he did. So you get to Syracuse, and now you're in a championship game. What's your thought process here? These guys are ranked, number 2 in the country, I think? Or there are 2 seeds, number 2 in the country.
I can't remember what they're ranked, but just
I'm on Wikipedia, so I've got it.
Incredible.
I keep telling Risley that Wikipedia is not a great source. So.
Yeah, they just beaten Providence, so it was a phenomenal team. It was just it was close throughout. There were several lead changes, but I don't know if anybody got up more than 5 or 6 points. So it was a game that was just tight throughout, and we were fortunate enough that they missed enough free throws in that last 4 minutes that gave us an opportunity to have Keith's heroics at the end.
Yeah. And then it's like, what I tell people is, what I wish is I had the opportunity to go back and do it all over again. Because if your team was like our team in '81, there was so much just focus on the next game. We never got beyond the next game. Is that kind of the way it was for you guys in '87? It's like, just win the next game.
Yeah.
Survive in advance. Yeah, just don't worry about anything. Just win the next game, and let's get this one out of the books and move forward. And you kind of methodically move through the whole process. Then all of a sudden, the game's over, and we beat North Carolina, and it's like, and you guys beat Syracuse. It's like, damn, we just won this thing. And you don't understand how much of a treat or how much of an honor and privilege that is to have done that. Is that kind of the same feeling that he brought with you guys?
Oh, yeah. Yep, exactly the same. Yeah, he was really good. I hear coaches, now talking about win the weekend and things like that.
Yeah.
I think all of that is, Coach Knight just, it was one game. He never talked about a bracket. He never talked about, here are our next 2 opponents. It was literally like, we might as well have been in the Big Ten playing at Illinois and at Purdue. And
it didn't matter.
We're going to beat Illinois, and that's our focus. And, then we'll talk about the next one later.
All right. Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about before we let Steve go is the 1984 Olympic experience. And Coach Knight was the coach on that team. You want to talk to us a little bit about showing up for the first practice? You see Michael Jordan, all these guys on the court. What went through your mind, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, probably the trials were even more of an amazing deal to me. I remember getting a letter, and I was in the dorm at the time, my freshman year, and the only letters I ever got in my dorm mailbox was, from my mom. And all of a sudden I got a letter in there from the Olympic Committee, and I'm one of 77 guys invited to the trials. And to me, that was just an incredible honor in itself, and I was just excited about that. And it just so happened the trials were right there in Bloomington, and right there in the field house. It's connected to Assembly Hall, and they put up all these scaffolding for, like, it looked like football practice, to where the coaches could stand way above the courts, and we had 4 or 5 courts going at once. And the people that were at that trials that didn't make the team, from Roy Tarpley, Mark Price, John Stockton, Carl Malone, Reggie Williams from Georgetown. I mean, it just went on and on and on of how many great players, Danny Manning, great players that were there that ended up not making the team, which was just, it got real surreal quick. But I can remember how fun that was, competing in that environment, and I just continued to make some cuts. I think early on I made some cuts strictly on shooting, and obviously my college coach was the Olympic coach, and that probably helped me in the early rounds of cuts. And then as it got closer to getting the team finalized, I just played real well. We were able to I shot the ball at a high level. I was taking care of the basketball. I knew my role. Anytime I was on Georgia's team, I got him the ball and got out of the way. So I wasn't trying to overstep anything. And then I think there was that other piece to it, that having me on the team would help the other guys understand how coach was and what to anticipate as we went through the summer. So I was fortunate, and as I worked through and navigated all, one of the neatest things ever happened to me in my entire career was to be able to actually started the gold medal game, and to be a starter in the gold medal game against Spain was something I'll never, ever forget. But I was a traditionalist. I just loved pickup games. I mean, I grew up again in the era where you played out on blacktops and city courts, and if you lost the game, you sit out for 40 minutes, no matter who your name was and who you were. And today, these kids growing up today, they can lose 3 games in a row and they're still playing. Back in the day, that didn't work. You kind of learned what losing was a little bit differently, and playing pickup games with those guys, or practicing in trials and then as the team, that was just a phenomenal experience. And it was just a great group of guys that I got a chance to hang out with all summer long. We played, not only were we 8-0 in the Olympics, but we played NBA All-Star teams throughout the state, traveling and preparing for the Olympics, and we won all 7 of those games. And there were obviously a lot of great players that played against us during the summer, and that was a tremendous experience.
we played you guys. Did we play you guys at Assembly Hall? Didn't they have a bunch of former IU players come down in '84 and play you guys?
I think we had one at Assembly Hall. We had one in Iowa City, Minneapolis. We played in Connecticut.
You had one at
Hoosier
Dome too, I think.
Yeah, the one at Hoosier was like 60,000 people.
60,000 people, yeah. But I think we did one. I had just come back from getting married in Hawaii. My wife and I, 35 years ago, had gotten married, and we came back, and I was asked to come down and play in that game with Radford and a bunch of the old guys, the older farts, and Scotty May and all those guys. I remember playing you guys, and I did you guys win that game? I don't even remember. Hell, I don't know. I got to play.
It was a team that never lost. So it was.
There you go.
That was a fun experience playing with those guys. So
the greatest thing that happened to me in my career. The greatest thing that happened to me in my career was there was no 3-point shot, or I would have sat a lot more than I already sat. So. Because I'd have fired one up, and Coach would have said, "Risley, you're not Kitchell. Sit down."
You wouldn't have shot a 3-pointer, Steve. You know that. Real quick, let's get your opinion on the Final Four coming up, Steve. Who do you like?
Yeah, that's a hard one because you got there's a couple teams that got in by playing really well, and that you probably didn't think were going to make it, but now they're not hiding from anybody. Texas Tech is a team that it might be playing as well as anybody right now. Them and Michigan State probably come into the thing playing at the highest level, and yet, Virginia seems to be on a destination because of what happened last year. Auburn has beaten all the blue bloods to get to this point. So you got different stories with all of them. So I think it makes for a real intriguing, Final Four of how all this sets up. Because you got different styles. You got a Michigan State team that likes to rebound and run. You got Tech and Virginia who really like to play at a slower tempo and grind you out defensively. And then you got Auburn that likes to fire threes. So it's really going to, I think, going to determine on what kind of style is presented in each of the games to see who will advance.
Well, I just want to bring up Risley picked Villanova at the start of the tournament to win it all.
I like Jay Wright.
There's a lot of brackets.
I know. I'm done. I don't pick these things. Hey, Steve, one last question. How's your relationship with Coach right now? Are you guys in good faith? I haven't talked to Coach in about a year and a half. Is it good? Yeah. How's he doing? Is he doing okay?
It's been good. Yeah, I think it has good days and bad days probably, but he called me right after I got fired at UCLA, and we had a great talk, and he gets you to laughing, and I'm looking forward. Some of us are going to go see him here in the spring. So, he's been a tremendous friend and mentor to me. So I greatly appreciate him.
Yeah, and I too. I've got a cell phone number, and I Avers. I get a phone call from Greeno or Avers or somebody, and we always would have. He would come in, he'd sneak in Indianapolis quietly. He would call players and come in and have dinners. And it was just a hamburger joint, working man's friend or something like that. It was called, and we would come there and we would close the joint down, and we would tell stories. And I got into that inner circle. I'm not in the 70. The 76 circle is the inner circle. Buckner and May and Benson and those guys. That's his closest. But I got part of that, and I had the most fondest memories of those moments, more so than ever playing for him. So I'm glad to hear that your relationship with him is good and strong, because I think the world of the guy. I hate that he gets beat up a lot for no real particular reason. But yeah, good to hear.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. And a lot
Steve,
having me on, so I appreciate you doing that.
Thanks for coming on. We'd love to have you again sometime if you want.
All right. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.
All right. So, Risley, at least.
Yo.
All right, guys. That was our interview for the Legends of Hoosier Hysteria with Steve Alford, as you could tell by the question. It was about a year ago. But in these times, as an Indiana fan, we might as well go back and relive some history, especially since I think our Indiana Hoosiers would have made the tournament this year. Also, there's no March Madness, which means no high school basketball tournament. But let's face it, to me, there hasn't been since 1998. The Legends of Hoosier Hysteria can be caught about every week, every 2 weeks. And if there's anybody out there that has any great stories about when they were in high school, sectional championships from a small school, regional championship, state championship, go ahead and go to Twitter and send me a direct message at Grueling Truth, because we would love to have them on to discuss that. Our first guest for this show was Bobby Plump a couple weeks ago, of course, the man who hit the shot in 1954 that will live forever in Hoosier lore. And our second guest, Steve Alford. You don't have to be a Steve Alford or a Bobby Plump. Maybe you're a guy that won a sectional at South Ripley or a regional at South Ripley, a small school. We'd love to be able to tell everybody's stories, so make sure you go to @GrillingTruth on Twitter, send me a direct message, and we would love to have you on the show. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up, and I want to thank Steve Risley and Steve Alford for joining us for the Legends of Hoosier Hysteria. I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.